He has barricaded himself. The kid yelled at what I could only assume was a very unimpressed dispatcher on speaker. The barricade in question? A 6-foot cedar privacy gate I had locked. My gate. My lock. On my property. Because apparently, I prefer not to operate a public park. The officer who responded took one look at the situation, slid the latch open, clacked it twice experimentally, and turned to the kid with the kind of exhausted patience only seasoned patrol officers possess. "Son," he said flatly, "this is how gates work." The kid started to protest, but the officer held up one hand and asked to see the property owner. That would be me. Standing on my own porch with a cup of coffee, watching this circus unfold on my lawn. Let me back up. I'm Nolan Pierce, a quiet analyst by trade, hobby woodworker by weekend, and drinker of coffee at what my neighbors probably consider scandalous decibels. I moved into Cedar Crest Meadows for exactly 2 reasons: the mature trees and the promise of what the brochure called discreet community living. What I got was Tricia Malloy. Tricia is the HOA president, a woman who wears visors like battle helmets and wields her clipboard like it's a traffic baton with legal authority. She has opinions about everything from mailbox heights to the acceptable shade of beige for front doors. Her teenager, Brandon, leads a pack of middle school kids who treat our cul-de-sac like a BMX arena. Bikes flying, shortcuts carved through every available yard. They'd cut through my side yard at least 3 times a day, trampling my flower beds and leaving tire tracks in the grass. So I did what any reasonable homeowner would do. I installed a handsome cedar side gate to keep the pack from treating my yard as their personal throughway. I matched the existing fence, used quality hardware, and even stained it to complement my house. Tricia called it hostile architecture. I called it a gate. First came the notes. Little printed cards tucked into my door handle with official-looking HOA letterhead. Gates discourage community flow, one read, as if my property were a municipal sidewalk. Then came the fines. Unneighborly access reduction, $50. Visual obstinacy, $75. Unauthorized latch, another $100. I'm not making these up. Each citation arrived with Tricia's looping signature and a payment deadline highlighted in yellow. She started leaning through my open garage to lecture me about porous yards and the importance of neighborhood connectivity. She used phrases like circulation patterns and pedestrian easement with the confidence of someone who had watched exactly one city planning documentary. Then she took it online, posting to our neighborhood chat forum with the subtlety of a foghorn. "Some people lock their gates," she wrote, followed by, "Thoughts?" The responses were mixed, but Tricia screenshotted only the ones agreeing with her and printed them out to leave on my windshield. Brandon began testing the latch like a determined raccoon, yanking it, jiggling it, and apparently logging his denials because I found tally marks scratched onto my fence in Sharpie. 14 marks. 14 attempts to open my locked gate. Tricia herself showed up one afternoon with a yardstick, measured my gate with absurd precision, and announced it was 1 inch 2 freedom negative. When I asked what that meant, she said I'd know when I got the fine. I emailed her the Architectural Review Committee approval I had received before installation, along with photos of the gate from 3 angles. She replied within minutes. Approvals can be spiritually revoked. I read that sentence 5 times trying to find the satire. There was none. Saturday afternoon, everything came to a head. The boys came barreling down the hill on their bikes, aimed directly at my side yard like it was a bowling lane with no pins. I was in my garage organizing tools when I heard the skidding. The gate was shut. Brandon discovered the lock, and I watched from my garage doorway as he performed what I can only describe as a tragic Shakespearean gasp. He rattled the gate, testing it with increasing frustration. Then he pulled out his phone and called 911 to report what he described as illegal blocking of a public passageway. I could hear him from my driveway. "Yes, it's an emergency," he insisted to the dispatcher. "He won't let us through." The dispatcher asked through. "Through what?" "Through his gate," Brandon said, as if this explained everything. Tricia arrived moments later, breathless and pointing, clutching a wrinkled photocopy of what she claimed was a walking path from 1998. A path that, conveniently, was never actually built. She informed the responding officer that my gate had captured community land and that my yard was technically an easement. She was so confident, so insistent, tapping her finger on the photocopy like it was the Magna Carta. The officer asked if she had documentation proving the easement. She said she had community memory and historical precedent. The officer looked at me. I shrugged. Then Tricia slipped. She admitted, right there in front of the officer, that she had tested the lock 3 times this week to verify the obstruction, which explained the fresh scratches around the latch that I had been wondering about. The officer asked if she had attempted to open a locked gate on someone else's property. Tricia said it wasn't someone else's property, it was community adjacent. Those were her exact words. Community adjacent. I'm a private person, but I'm not powerless. I excused myself, walked calmly to my office, and returned with receipts. Not emotional receipts. Actual receipts. The recorded plat map showing my property lines in crisp black ink, with the county recorder's stamp and signature. My survey with the pins still marking the corners, completed just 8 months ago when I bought the house. The HOA's own bylaws, highlighted in yellow, with a section about owner-maintained fences and gates clearly stating that property owners may install and secure fencing within their property boundaries. And the ARC approval form, stamped in red with the word approved and Tricia's own signature at the bottom, dated 6 weeks prior. The patrol sergeant radioed county zoning while Tricia stood there insisting they check the historical maps. Zoning texted back within minutes. No easement on Lot 42. Property lines confirmed per recorded survey. Then I pulled up my Ring camera footage on my phone. The officer leaned in to watch. There was Tricia, 3 days ago, lifting my latch with a butter knife, trying to figure out how the lock mechanism worked. There was Brandon 2 days ago, yanking the gate hard enough to make the hinges whine and the whole fence shake. And there, in glorious high definition from yesterday afternoon, was Tricia whispering to her son while gesturing at the gate. The officer asked me to turn up the volume. If it breaks, Tricia said on camera, it was loose. We just found it that way. The officer's eyebrows tried to leave his face. He asked Tricia if she'd like to revise her statement. She said the camera angle was misleading. Cedar Crest held a special meeting in the clubhouse 2 weeks later. Half the neighborhood showed up for the drama. The other half showed up for the Costco cookie trays stacked on the refreshment table. I had requested the meeting through official channels, submitted my agenda items in writing, and prepared a presentation. Tricia tried to deny my request initially, but the board treasurer reminded her that any homeowner could call for a special session per the bylaws. She showed up in her best power visor. I presented my case with slides projected onto the community room wall using the clubhouse projector. Slide 1 was the plat map with the mythical walking path clearly labeled as proposed, abandoned, 1998. I zoomed in on the notation that said never constructed, removed from Plan 1999. Slide 2 showed Bylaws Clause 7.3, which explicitly stated gates permitted, locks permitted, owner discretion for security measures. Slide 3 was the Ring camera clip of Tricia advising Brandon to test access rights, which I had edited into a tight 2-minute compilation of every attempt to breach my gate. The room was silent except for the video audio. Slide 4 was a letter from County Council, politely but firmly clarifying that calling 911 to dispute a gate lock is not a recognized emergency and may constitute misuse of emergency services, and that repeated attempts to open a locked gate on private property could be considered attempted trespassing. I had requested this letter specifically after the incident, and the county had been remarkably helpful. Slide 5 was the itemized list of fines Tricia had issued, totaling $475, along with my formal request for reimbursement and a written apology. The board's attorney, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, cleared his throat and began explaining terms like tortious interference, harassment, and abuse of authority. He noted that the HOA could face liability if homeowners were punished for exercising their legal property rights. The vote to rescind my fines passed 7-0. Tricia abstained, claiming bias. Then came the real stunner. A motion was made to censure Tricia for instructing minors to trespass and to remove her president perk, which included her key to the common area storage shed, her reserved parking spot, and her stipend of $100 per month. She stood up, her face pale, her visor slightly crooked. "But the shed is my office," she protested. The treasurer didn't even look up from his notes. "It stores folding chairs, Tricia." The vote passed 6-1. Only Tricia's best friend voted no. Tricia lost the presidency that night. She also gained something new, a court-ordered boundary lesson in the form of a civil injunction. She and Brandon were now